Hey everybody, there's this passage in the Bible where Jesus is telling a story about forgiveness, and he tells it about this man who comes to settle accounts with some of his servants, and brings one servant in who owes like an absurd amount of money and has an amazing amount of debt on his ledger, and the master chooses to forgive the servant. But then the servant does something really interesting. He goes away, having just been forgiven of this massive amount of debt, finds somebody who owes him a pretty insignificant amount of money, and says, "Hey, unless you pay, I'm gonna. If you can't pay, I'm gonna throw you into prison." And he goes to choke him, and he gets very angry and violent at this fellow servant who can't repay this seemingly insignificant debt. And Jesus basically says this. In the story, he says, "Listen, this story illustrates how my Father in heaven looks at you and I if we don't forgive." In other words, God has a desire to forgive you, but if you can't forgive other people their sins against you, then your Heavenly Father is unable to forgive you for the things that you've done. And it got me thinking about this idea of bee stings, how oftentimes bees get aggravated, and that's when they want to sting you. And it's kind of like a reaction of anger for a bee because you're messing with them, and so they're going to come mess with you back. And in the process, they sting you out of anger or spite or whatever, but the end result is their own demise. In fact, when a honeybee stings you, it leaves not only the stinger, but part of its like abdomen and some of its muscles, and like it has this huge abdomen rupture that causes the bee to die. Anytime somebody does something to you or to me, and we withhold forgiveness from them, when we don't give forgiveness, when we choose to hold them accountable and try and make them pay for something that ultimately they can't pay for anyways, that God already has paid for, if we're trying to make them pay for something that God already is paying for, we're withholding that forgiveness. And God says that if you withhold forgiveness, then He has no choice but to withhold forgiveness. And it's this idea that if we hold on to unforgiveness, if we harbor bitterness or offense towards other people, even if we retaliate out of anger like a bee would and try and sting them, ultimately the person who experiences the most devastation is us. Choosing to not forgive somebody ultimately hurts us more than it hurts them. And some of us are dying on the inside, and there's something in us that just is continuing to rupture and bleed out, and we don't really realize it. And I think that if we would recognize that offense and that bitterness is poisoning us from the inside out, that the simple remedy is to recognize that if Jesus is willing to forgive them, then we should be willing to forgive them too. Does it make it right? Does it make the pain go away? It doesn't make the memory go away, because it's not about forgiving and forgetting, but it is about forgiving and choosing to look at their transgressions the way Jesus looks at their transgressions, paid for. So quit trying to retaliate and sting other people. No more bee stings. And instead choose forgiveness and watch healing begin to take place in your life as a result. Hope this has helped you have faith for today. We'll talk to you soon.